All right, we'll get started. Super excited to talk about a great topic. Had a lot of interest in not only on our partners, but our customers, talking about a healthcare solution that we call the Clinical Cloud Desktop. I'll talk about what the solution is and the different intricate pieces of it. We'll also, for those who attended, send out the presentation today and track with you in terms of any questions that you have. We'll make sure that we get those answered as part of this webinar or follow up right after. So let's jump right in. So real quick, a little bit about CoreTech. For those who are not familiar with us, we are a Microsoft Azure partner, a really strategic Microsoft partner focusing on our Azure Expert MSP practice, both on the security side for our MSP and MSSP. We have multiple strategic partnerships with Citrix and Imprivata, Nerdio and IGEL, along with Dynatrace and Terraform, which is a HashiCorp tool, many different awards and certifications. We'd love to talk to you more about our capabilities there, but really want to jump into our main topic today. For those who don't know me, my name is Brian Barnes. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at a company called CoreTech, located here just outside of Detroit in Michigan. We have sales and technical talent really pretty much across the country. Been in healthcare for 25 plus years and really focused into the solutions that I'm about to talk to today, as well as a plethora of other ones. So if you have any questions or want some follow-up from me directly, my email's right there at brian.barnes@coretech.com. We'd love to engage with you and talk more about our solution and our capabilities there. So today we're talking about a strategic solution that we spent a lot of time in called the Clinical Cloud Desktop. And first, I wanted to introduce it as not only a solution and a strategy, but a conglomeration of multiple technologies that we build out for our customers in terms of how they do on-premise hybrid cloud and native cloud technologies in healthcare, and focusing around clinical workflow and the solutions that surround it. So real quickly, what is the Clinical Cloud Desktop? So it's offered as both a hybrid cloud and a cloud-native solution, leveraging Microsoft Azure with products like AVD and Windows 365, as well as other M365-based products, both in E3 and E5, both managing the solution and securing the solution. It is an end-to-end solution with strong two-factor authentication. It leverages single sign-on along with potential roaming desktop experiences or kiosk experiences where an EHR is actually presented to that endpoint, typically at bedside or other clinical workflow scenarios where a user might just be switching their user contacts in and out of that one application, or roaming their entire virtual desktop, including all their mail and other third-party apps as they roam or as they round around the healthcare environment, both from an acute and an ambulatory perspective. We build the Clinical Cloud Desktop as a customized user and device-centric solution that's focused on clinical workflows and automating a lot of what we do with a product called Imprivata, and really focus into the specific use cases that are important for healthcare, both in-person and health providers, as well as telehealth and other solutions that we drive towards. So we typically focus on endpoint strategy and backend server resources, really built mostly from a hybrid perspective as well as Microsoft Azure. And the goal is to access that information as quickly and efficiently as possible from any device and at any time. The benefits of the Clinical Cloud Desktop is it focuses on improving patient care, giving doctors and nurses up to an hour to 2 hours back in their day and their rounding experience. Typically when you have healthcare providers interacting with many different types of applications, whether it's in their EHR or administration related, as well as documents or collaboration suites. They're entering many passwords, many different usernames around the day. And our goal is to streamline all of that access and give that time back to providing better patient care. It is really focused into specific workflows at specific areas where you mostly are driving the value to that experience to that end user. Our goal is to make the technology that they interact with transparent and make it as quick as possible to transact so they can get into that patient documentation, as well as providing the focus towards the patient where it's most needed. From the healthcare organization by itself, it's highly focused on improving financial metrics with giving more patient time back to the care provider, being focused more on the patient, as well as driving in the specific ROIs of the project that kind of build into PC refresh cycles or things that make financial matters most into the healthcare organization. We also tend to leverage the cloud very heavily. A lot of organizations that we deal with are looking down the road at a large capital refresh of their data center with a 3 to 5 year cycle of hardware that is becoming more and more increasingly difficult to gain and get access to for some of the supply chain challenges that we've had over the years, as well as focusing in on improving security. So not only are we focused on role-based access, but giving the proper access levels to the users where they need it, and eliminating the needs for generic logins and shared IDs, which is also driving better HIPAA compliance and PII and PHI related data to make sure that compliance is key. And for us, we want to give this most secure access to those resources as possible without limiting the use of that technology in a hindering way. So when we talk about fast, secure access to all endpoints, we're talking about things like tapping a badge at an endpoint at a traditional workstation. Typically, when you're engaged inside of an acute or in an ambulatory setting, you're sharing workstations either at a room or at a nursing station where multiple different users and shifts are accessing that endpoint. Typically, we've seen over the past years, clinicians kind of check out a cart and kind of hold tight to that cart for their whole day. We also see with this type of solution, we're driving down the number of needed endpoints in specific areas because users are accessing it much more efficiently and not able, to really have the complexity that they've had in the past with gaining access and making sure that device works with them for the whole shift. We also focus and specialize on key walkaway and security-based solutions where the endpoint can detect the proximity of a specific user. And as that user moves away from that endpoint, we can securely lock it based upon the distance of that user from that endpoint, as well as interacting with shared mobile devices and roaming types of desktops and carts that physicians typically engage with. We also have had a lot of success with creating multiple printer-based strategies which secure patient data so that it doesn't sit out on printers for a long period of time, and that when a user taps a badge to a printer, that print release expedites and happens right where that user is standing. So really giving fast access to all the endpoints and information that user needs by leveraging the power of the cloud. We also focus on multiple different deployment options with the clinical cloud desktop. And with our focus in Microsoft technologies, both in M365 and Azure, we also are providing a lot of cloud agility and cloud capability to our healthcare customers by leveraging a Windows 365 type of workload that sits in Azure, which really kind of gears more a personalized cloud PC experience, very easy to administrate as well as kind of a predictable cost per month. We also have a lot of customers that are leveraging a product in Microsoft called the Azure Virtual Desktop, which gives you, as an administrator, very granular control as well as density into multi-session Windows-based VMs, things like remote app streaming, and even some more specialized workloads where the performance of that endpoint, as well as the performance of the cloud desktop is key and paramount, as well as leveraging current investments that healthcare organizations have made in products like Citrix and VMware to augment their cloud-based strategies with capitalizing on the power of that hybrid cloud, where you keep a certain portion of desktops on-premise and managed while leveraging the expansive and agile way to burst in cloud to deprecate future data center type investments as you kind of leverage the power of the cloud. So we're going to talk a little bit more about those three different options as part of the solution, but our clinical cloud desktop solution is both hybrid cloud as well as driving into cloud native type of solutions with products like Imprivata and IGEL. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Here's an example of a hybrid cloud architecture where we balance both an on-premise environment with multiple data centers and then leveraging the power of Microsoft Azure for a burstable capacity region, or even doing an active-based workload leveraging Citrix and Microsoft Azure with AVD and Windows 365, all managed and provisioned as part of your Citrix resources. We also do this for our VMware Horizon-based customers, as well as driving into managing a large Imprivata one-sign enterprise, where we're actually flexing that capability into the cloud. So if a healthcare customer had let's say, a data center outage, we would have that Imprivata presence inside of that Azure region, managing the single sign-on workflows for Windows 365 and Microsoft AVD as part of that Citrix experience. Obviously, managing an environment as complex like this takes a lot of experience, but we also have a ton of experience moving into more of a cloud-native capability and leveraging the power of a product called Imprivata, to which we build a lot of integrations, both from a partner perspective, but also as a customer of Imprivata, for integrating EMR-based workflows, EHR applications like Cerner, Epic, and Meditech, Allscripts, and alike. So managing what those clinical workflow experiences are based upon the endpoint the users interact with, as well as driving into a hybrid cloud capacity, both leveraging a product like Citrix Cloud or Horizon Cloud, as well as Microsoft Azure for their virtual desktop expansion and capabilities. We also specialize in a ton of different hardware products at the edge, whether you have Dell, thin clients, you're an HP customer, or actually looking at third-party products like Lenovo and LG, we can actually provide that similar experience using a product called IGEL that actually displaces that OS to a secure cloud-based next-generation OS that has all the intricate features with Imprivata support that we're going to talk a little bit more about later in this presentation. But from a clinical workflow perspective, Imprivata and the experience that we have with it is really kind of built as a foundational component to create all of these different workflow experiences with the clinical cloud desktop. One thing that we talk a lot about is managing the different healthcare workflows, whether it's inside the hospital and an acute care scenario, whether a physician or a clinician is accessing patient data at an ambulatory site, or whether there's a telehealth scenario where doctors are interfacing with customers in more of a collaborative experience using, let's say Zoom or Microsoft Teams, so that we can interact with the patient and the healthcare system through a common platform and virtual desktop experience. Whether you're balancing that as part of your Microsoft Azure or on-premise private cloud, whether you're leveraging Citrix or VMware, or natively with Microsoft on its own, our goal is to transition between those delivery platforms in the most convenient way for the end user and provide desktops and applications at time of need, leveraging those products of Imprivata and IGEL. Definitely, we've had a ton of success delivering that, and as part of the clinical cloud desktop solution strategy, it's something that healthcare organizations have used and continue to invest in to decrease the impact to user experience across this vertical. So I wanted to dig a little deeper into the clinical cloud desktop when it comes to cloud native solutions, and talk a little bit about the different virtualization strategies that are leveraged, not only in healthcare as the vertical, but in multiple different verticals that we engage with. And as you can see, from a security and regulation perspective, healthcare data is very critical. The security of that data is paramount, in making sure that we're interacting with that data in the most secure way. That's where virtualization is good to protect not only how you access that data from the endpoint, but all the way protecting that data in the data center and in your cloud environments. We also engage with a remote workforce, obviously with the pandemic. It's kind of spread our user base out a little bit more and how we interact with um, those healthcare users, as well as the patients that we interact with. We need a technology to support a hybrid remote workforce. And so this continues to be a great virtualization strategy when we're looking at supporting those workers, as well as growing and expanding workforce and through mergers and acquisitions. So it's an easy way to onboard new user bases, as well as short-term employees and contract-based employees. And these virtualization strategies are built off of two technologies that are kind of special built, not only for industry, but for an industry that has a very dynamic need, both for security and for accessibility. One of those is a product called Cloud PC or Windows 365. And this solution inside of the Microsoft toolset is really optimized for simplicity. It gives that personalized desktop experience to the end user. It's very easy to administer in terms of managing it through a native Microsoft tool set like Microsoft Intune, which is a product component of a larger product set called MEM, or Microsoft Endpoint Management, where we have a lot of different security tools based upon the ability to manage that endpoint, manage that virtual desktop as part of a single platform. On the right, you'll see that what's called Cloud VDI, or Azure Virtual Desktop, is optimized for flexibility. And this gives the administrator and the healthcare organization the ability to give an experience that's kind of locked down, but also gives full control over the configuration and management of that endpoint, as well as the virtual desktop that's hosted inside of your Microsoft Azure region. We can deliver that on a Windows 10 or Windows 11 OS, or even something called multi-session OSs, where we're having multiple users in a single Azure instance of Windows 11 or a server-based OS. This solution also has full Citrix and VMware support. So if you wanted to extend this clinical cloud desktop from your existing Citrix or VMware environment that you have today and on-prem, we can very easily build that out and expand that into Microsoft Azure along with Imprivata to support that clinical cloud desktop in a cloud native mode. So really choosing that technology based upon how you're licensed, as well as your future strategy of what use cases work best. There's a great conversation and strategy that we built for our healthcare customers on when and when not to use these two technologies as part of a specific use case or overall strategy. So Windows PC, I wanted to talk a little bit more about that. We're actually seeing a lot of great traction for organizations that are trying to balance what they might own in a Microsoft license today, where they might want to procure a Windows 365 Cloud PC license for specific use cases, and kind of balance those solutions based upon the type of need that you desire. A lot of times when you're working, let's say, with remote coders or developers, they're into one or two applications. You're providing a personal, user experience to that end user, and it's very easy to control. It's very consistent, low administrative overhead. It also gives you a pay option where you know what your user per month charge is based upon the compute instance that you're buying as part of your Windows 365 license. You're also able to provision and tune all the applications that user would need as part of their Windows 365 Cloud OS, as well as integrated unified security and identity management. So all the things that healthcare is focused in on with security, as well as accessing these technologies outside of your four walls, is really important in terms of how you build out that solution strategy for your hybrid workforce, as well as how you leverage the technology in the cloud. So again, we talked a little bit about, always ready and updated, always patched and ready to go from a personal perspective. It's scalable and resilient, so you can supply the service out of specific, Azure regions where are closest to your users to access, or quite honestly, centralized for user access across the world. So we've had, great experiences leveraging a desktop that might be hosted out of European Azure regions and access from your users in the US or vice versa. So it also gives you scalable and resilient technology that's predictable in cost and very simple to buy and manage as part of an administrative strategy. So it also integrates seamlessly with all of your Microsoft Cloud services. So whether you're leveraging products like Microsoft Intune and Azure Active Directory, leveraging the security side with Microsoft Defender or Microsoft 365 apps. It works seamlessly as part of a Windows 365 strategy to build that capability for your end users. And what we've seen for our healthcare customers is the ability to look at a specific use case inside of healthcare where it might be better managed with Windows 365 because it fits a specific use case, whereas maybe some more of your clinical based applications are delivered through your on-premise data center and Microsoft Azure Virtual Desktop, so your AVD environment. Whether you're leveraging M365 for AVD or have license procured through Windows 365 for your specific use cases, is something that we're seeing a strategy being built on different types of personas and use cases deployed across the healthcare environment. Some of the technical and license support requirements for Windows 365, as well as kind of the different needs and requirements around how to procure it. So obviously you need to buy a license for Windows 365, which gives you the compute instance along with the OS. You need obviously an Azure subscription for that workload to reside in, as well as building out your Azure virtual network and line of sight to a domain controller for hybrid joined. It does operate as an Azure AD joined or hybrid Azure AD joined machine identity. Based upon the types of Imprivata integration that we do, that's a really important feature in terms of how Imprivata would interact with that hybrid Azure AD joined environment versus being just natively joined with Azure AD. We'll get a little bit more into that in a later slide. Also, the image, you can bring your own image inside of your Windows 365 environment or go directly from a gallery-based image. Everything with Windows 365 is managed by Microsoft Intune. It also supports co-management with SCCM and Configuration Manager. And then you can see some of the admin permissions that are kind of shown down below for the RBAC controls and provisioning that we do as part of that workload. Shifting now to the Azure Virtual Desktop, as well as another component, we've seen a lot quicker adoption to AVD inside of healthcare, especially with organizations that are leveraging Citrix and want to leverage the power of Azure to deprecate an on-premise DC, or even use it as a safeguard for reversible DR and business continuity strategies. And really, when we look at Azure Virtual Desktop, we look at three primary use cases. First and foremost, looking at how Citrix had been running on-prem for, decades now, where you're leveraging a server-based OS and then multiple user sessions are delivered from that. Now with the solution of Azure Virtual Desktop, we can leverage a Windows 10 or 11 enterprise OS and have that same multi-session capability. We actually see a widespread adoption of this only because a lot of the applications that have been built over the years, especially inside of healthcare, when we deal with a lot of legacy applications, there's less customization needed a lot of times when you're trying to make these applications function on a Windows client-based OS instead of a server-based OS. So we're seeing a lot of success driving into AVD with Windows 10 and Windows 11 multi-session, as well as single desktops where you're trying to safeguard the performance of a desktop to an end user and really kind of giving the best performance that you need. We really see most inside of healthcare that middle scenario being leveraged the most with multi-session Win 10 and 11 enterprise OS. So something definitely we've had a lot of traction on, especially for our large Citrix customers that are leveraging Citrix for, let's say, Epic Hyperspace delivery or accessing a Cerner data center in Kansas City for their Cerner-based EHR platform. So that Citrix technology leveraging Microsoft Azure Virtual Desktop has been a great win-win scenario for our customers. Azure Virtual Desktop is available worldwide. So a lot of times, when you looked at the last couple of years, they released AVD in certain specific geographical regions. Now that AVD has pretty much been proliferated throughout the time period of the pandemic, we've actually seen AVD desktops being delivered in every Azure region that's out there and being supported. So we can provide a full desktop experience for that user. They can access the mail as well as their clinical and healthcare-based applications. We can deliver a remote app experience with Azure Virtual Desktop. So we're delivering, let's say, only an application where a end user will be interacting with patient data and not giving them a full desktop experience, but just only the app. We also give, a lot of desktop full experiences from a roaming desktop perspective integrated with Imprivata. The goal for us is reducing the cost and time spent managing your on-premise environment, whether it's deploying racks of new servers and spending the time for building and patching and maintaining that environment. That's all being done as part of your Azure consumption spend within the cloud. So as we kind of look more to the cloud native solution, there's a lot of benefits and gains by not managing legacy data center assets, as well as the simple management provisioning and burstability and the agility that comes with the cloud. So when we say we can deploy and scale in minutes, that truly is. If you have an instant need, we can deploy Azure Virtual Desktop in different regions whenever we're ready based upon capacity constraints. So from that perspective, the goal is to burst and scale as quickly as possible in the cloud. This slide kind of talks about what is under your control as part of a Microsoft Azure customer and what's being managed as part of Microsoft. When you look at the applications, whether it's in your subscription and under your control, you're managing all the policies, the image user densities, the VM sizes that you're choosing, what users access what environment based upon the desktop tools that you set up. All the networking policies are under your control, as well as the different desktops, whether it's a full desktop or remote app shown on the left for Windows 10 and Windows 11, as well as server-based OSs 2012 R2 and up. What's managed by Microsoft is obviously the AVD service itself. So when your endpoints reach out and access that AVD service, that gateway, that client connection, that broker is a global service that's managed and maintained by Microsoft, as well as the infrastructure that supports the AVD workload, so the compute, storage, and networking. That's what you get as part of your consumption costs when you buy from Microsoft Azure, whether it's through a Microsoft CSP like Cortec, which is a direct seller of Azure, or you're swiping a credit card for PayGo or procuring Azure as part of your enterprise agreement with Microsoft directly. Those are the specific areas of your control versus Microsoft control. The connectivity to Microsoft Azure can be done through VPN or a product called ExpressRoute, which is a direct connection. It's also leveraging the bandwidth constraints that you would have based upon the ISP and the circuit that is being configured. We also drive into multiple different strategy around identity and authentication, whether you're leveraging Active Directory on-premise and extending that into your Azure Active Directory environment, and hybrid joining or Azure AD joining those endpoints and virtual workloads. We do a lot of integration with Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager and Intune. So when you buy M365 as part of a licensing suite, you get that same license capability to leverage inside of Azure for AVD, as well as the management portfolio of tools that you have with endpoint management like Intune and many others as part of your license that you procure. Supporting devices running non-Windows operating system, and this is where we have a lot of success with a product called IGEL, I mentioned a little bit earlier, which is a Linux-based thin client OS that's specially purposed for accessing cloud-based resources, not only in Microsoft Azure, but a plethora of other clouds, as well as your on-premise environment, and integrates perfectly and seamlessly with the AVD desktop global service, as well as your Citrix and VMware Horizon Cloud environments to pull those desktops at time of need. So one of the things that we do is look holistically at our customers in terms of gaining access and using the Microsoft investments that they've leveraged as part of their holistic strategy as an organization. Again, with AVD and M365, making sure security is front and focused around conditional access and multi-factor authentication, leveraging role-based access controls around accessing not only your M365 environment, but your environment that's supporting your virtual desktop strategy, as well as leveraging Azure for a global service of many different combined services, whether it's data and AI, machine learning, as well as different application and web-based services that you're providing as part of a SaaS or PaaS-based service as part of Microsoft Azure. So, really blending that holistic strategy for the clinical cloud desktop around your Microsoft strategy and leveraging the technology needed for the types of use cases you're tackling for your specific end users and types. One of the things that just was released, actually just last week, and this is kind of hot off the presses, is we have a lot of customers that are looking at IGEL and Imprivata and saying, how do we build and interact natively with Microsoft ABD and Windows 365 with our IGEL powered endpoints without a broker service like Citrix and VMware. And one of the things that IGEL and Imprivata had recently announced is an extension and expansion of their partnership. What this has actually done between the development and business-related partnership that they have is a native authentication experience from IGEL and Imprivata directly to Microsoft ABD and Windows 365. It's something that was announced last week during a partner and customer conference called Disrupt, which is hosted by IGEL and very heavily attended by a lot of Imprivata and partners in that ecosystem. We were super excited to be a part of it. And during that show, we actually heard of a lot of great announcements with IGEL being able to natively authenticate into ABD, leveraging Imprivata, single sign-on, and badge tap-based access workflows. So why this is exciting is because we have really, for the first time, an ability with Imprivata to authenticate directly to Microsoft ABD and Windows 365. So if your organization hasn't made large investments in Citrix or looking to leverage more of a cloud-native solution, this is actually coming to pre-release and controlled release on April 18th. I have a little bit more information on this as we go to the next few slides, but super exciting, especially when you're looking at building out a cloud-native Imprivata, IGEL, and Microsoft solution, leveraging the power of single sign-on with Imprivata. Also leveraging the local IGEL OS of those endpoints for gaining access to those virtualization strategies. Real quick information about security for IGEL. There is a great use case that IGEL has done a great job explaining about something called the chain of trust. And with this endpoint security capability, you're actually checking each layer of that boot and authentication sequence against the cryptographic signatures of the next starting resource, and making sure that any failure at any one of those steps where there might be an injected security concern, that authentication would fail and would be notified to the administrators of that environment that something's wrong. So we have tighter security at the edge, as well as tighter security with gaining access to those resources and endpoints with Imprivata. And just wanted to kind of pause and mention that IGEL is a strategic vendor that we leverage as part of our healthcare strategy for that thin client approach to jumping to your virtual desktop workloads. And security is usually a great positional foundational statement that you jump off of when you talk about those endpoints, as well as the ability to drive into more expansive use cases with replacing legacy PCs with just replacing the OS with IGEL. So repurposing those PCs that might be end of life and getting a little bit of life left out of them before you move to more thin client approaches is something customers have really loved to see and do over the past. Imprivata does many different things. If you look on the right, there's really 3 product sets that make up the Imprivata suite. The big one there for healthcare is called Imprivata One Sign. That's where you're going to get single sign-on and access to something called VDA, which creates the authentication workflow that pulls that virtual desktop down, as well as different authentication management platforms leveraging RFID readers and badge taps as well as tokens on your phone for secure walkaway. Imprivata is kind of the heart and the foundational component for all of that workflow, automation and development, as well as moving down into Confirm ID, which is another product that they license and maintain for EPCS-based workflows or medical device access, as well as identity and governance for a platform where we can provision users directly through the Imprivata identity and access management solution. So definitely wanted to kind of give Imprivata their props for not only being a foundational component, but building up a lot of the automation and integration with IGEL to move more towards a cloud native capability. So as Imprivata and IGEL looked across the environment of their customers, they are seeing a trend where they're moving more to DaaS-based offerings and driving into cloud native-based offerings where multiple industries as well as healthcare is looking to centralize their workloads, become more cloud nimble and agile, and move to products like Microsoft Azure to do that with. We also see that being done across EHR environments where they've been managing multiple different types of physical data centers. They're also leveraging and moving to the cloud for the scale and capacity that it has. Also around the native workflows of securing the endpoint that we talked a little bit about and removing Windows from the endpoint. And some might say that that was something that would be contrary to a Microsoft message, but when they released Windows 365 as well as AVD, there's multiple Microsoft speakers that said the power of security at the edge and managing and maintaining Windows in the cloud is something that many verticals were interested in for the ease and simplicity of deployment. And as IGEL and Imprivata deepens their partnership and focuses mostly on clinical experience and the advantages it brings, we're also driving into the mobility of that clinical staff. And with that mobile workforce being and accessing information at different areas in and out of the four walls of the hospital, security becomes more and more important. So as you're leveraging that secure workflow and the proximity-based authentication and services that you're leveraging for your virtual apps and desktops, you want to make sure that that IGEL Imprivata integration with AVD and Windows 365 is a focused one. And you have expertise that's driving into a company that has helped deploy these solutions in multiple different scenarios before. I will also mention with the clinical cloud desktop, we have seen other industries outside of healthcare start to leverage Imprivata. And even though Imprivata is and primarily has been a healthcare-based solution, we're starting to see more and more adoption of Imprivata because of their strong security mindset and capabilities for things like building access cards, accessing your desktop at your endpoint have a lot of value. And whether it's in manufacturing or on the shop floor or call centers where you have shift users logging in and logging out at specific shifts, Imprivata can help modernize that experience for those end users. Last couple slides here. So I wanted to make sure that this controlled release that's starting April 18th, if you reach out to me at brian.barnes@cortec.com, I can champion you and your request to get an early release for the IGEL and Imprivata integration for the Azure Virtual Desktop experience and Windows 365 authentication experience. So definitely email me if you want help in getting to the right place to request that pre-release. They will be releasing that as a license for a period of time while they start to get more expansion and support for the product. And once that it gets a full GA release, they'll lift that license so that you can gain access to all their OS 12 features as part of that AVD and Windows 365 experience. One of the things that we've looked at across that expanded strategic partnership with IGEL and Imprivata is that they've combined a lot of those policies that were typically made for user and device-based policies into more streamlined policies for VDA, leveraging IGEL OS policies that you're placing inside your UMS environment. Those key focus areas are a Prove ID web client that's built against the APIs of Imprivata and not leveraged in something called Prove ID Embedded, which was an appliance mode that healthcare has used for those IGEL types of workflows, over the past few years. And now as we kind of move into a mixed environment where you might have appliance mode endpoints and non-appliance mode endpoints, we're starting to see different strategies being developed in a single one-side enterprise to drive that. The automatic launch of virtual desktops or apps based upon device location, again, extends the Imprivata VDA user policy so that when users tap their badge and authenticate into the global AVD service, they're pulling that desktop down based upon what's provisioned to them from that user. And again, that works directly with AVD as well as Windows 365. We're also supporting fast user switching as part of Epic hosted combined workflows with Citrix on IGEL and local IGEL OS desktop browser support. And one of the things that we've seen is organizations might want to leverage something on that endpoint as well as their virtual workloads and applications, being able to pull the power of that local endpoint down and leverage the browser of that instead of it being hosted. So some of those unique workflows are something that we're starting to see, and IGEL and Imprivata are developing that with Microsoft. And then lastly, CoreTech is providing the solution that's actually in the Azure Marketplace, but also an offer that we're providing here called the Clinical Cloud Desktop POC, where we can build some of these solutions in an environment for you to test and look at some of those sub 10-second reconnect time workflows with AVD and Windows 365 that we've been able to achieve with our customers. If you scan the QR code on the right, it'll take you to this offer and this landing page where you can provide your information, and we can track with you and talk with you in terms of what strategies are starting to develop and how AVD and Windows 365, as well as a holistic clinical cloud desktop experience that you might have in the horizon for 2023. So we're super excited, to kind of talk more about that with you. So if you want to scan the QR code or email me directly at brian.barnes@CoreTech, I'd love to talk to you about that more in the future. And then I will see if we have any questions. Let me pop this up. It was great talking to everybody today. See, I'll give a few more seconds if anybody had any questions here. If you want to type it into the chat. All right, we did have one come in. So how this basically asks, how can you leverage your current Citrix investments and most easily leverage Azure Virtual Desktop as part of a holistic strategy? So we talked a little bit about that, whether you had a Citrix investment today and you're supporting within your on-premise data center a Citrix application or a Citrix desktop that you're supporting from your on-premise environment. We can take that same image, whether it's on server 2018 or even 2012 R2, and take that same image into Azure, extended for all the extended support options you would have, and leverage that with Citrix Cloud. One of the caveat with that is if you haven't migrated and procured Citrix DAS as part of a Citrix Cloud service, there's some efficiencies that are gained as you migrate to Citrix Cloud by tapping in and leveraging Microsoft Azure as part of that brokered experience. So I'd say if you have some goals and you've already pivoted to Citrix Cloud, it's really easy to extend into Microsoft Azure. A lot of healthcare organizations might have an Azure subscription that already exists inside their enterprise agreement, or even a CSP agreement that you can procure through CoreTech. And once that Citrix environment is stood up, you can actually very easily take that image and make it a burstable capacity into Azure after you do something called a CAF, or a common adoption framework, where we're kind of building out Azure to accept that landing zone in that workload. So that was a great question. I'll just wait a few more minutes if there's any other questions. All right, I don't see any more, so I will conclude. And for those who attended, we'll make sure you can get a copy of the presentation. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to email me or scan this QR code at the end here, and would love talk to you more about the clinical cloud desktop and the experiences that we're having with our customers deploying it. Thanks, everybody. It was great talking to you today.